Okay, so I'm Teri Franzen, and probably most of you have heard from me before. I'm a software engineer by day and a wildlife photographer by night. And one of my earliest projects that really got me going was spending a lot of time at a local wetland. And let's see, Brick Pond Nature Preserve, which is on the eastern edge of Owego, New York. And the protected area is this section that I've circled in green. And then this is actually private land circled in red. I didn't actually know that when I first started, so I've spent all kinds of time over this way because there weren't posted signs. There are posted signs now, so I don't get to go spend time over here anymore. But this is a wetland, and you can see that it has a beaver lodge right here. So it just has a whole slew of wild activities during the day. However, if you're just coming out, you're not going to see a large percentage of it, just because when wildlife sees you, it's going to either move away or fly away. And I found that out quickly when I first started trying to, my biggest agenda item was wood ducks. I wanted to get really good looks at wood ducks. And so I heard that this was a good location for that. So when the very first time I came here, I was just new with photography. I was just new with trying to get close to wildlife. And so this is gonna be, I'm gonna introduce my journey just a little bit, just to let you know what it took to see the behaviors that I've witnessed. And when I first arrived at the parking lot, I saw a family of geese, and immediately they scooted into the brush and swam away. So that was kind of the trend for that day. So then I saw a great blue heron, and I was excited about that. But of course, it saw me and it flew away. And kind of same story with a green heron. It flew into a tree across the water. And then for the rest of my time there, the great blue heron and the green heron stayed significantly too far away for my lens at the time, and just too far away for any good images anyway, because you get a lot of heat distortion across the pond. But my target objects were wood ducks, as I mentioned, and I wanted to figure out how to get close to them. And of course, the same story, they just move across the pond or fly away. So I did this is a terrible image, sorry. I'm just showing you this because I did a lot of reconnaissance and tried to figure out where the wood ducks would kind of gather. And it was way down at the end on the private end of the pond, which again, I didn't know that wasn't part of Brick Pond at the time. But and then I found the wood ducks, and I knew that this was way across the pond. And I knew that if I was going to get the images that I wanted, I was going to have to be camouflaged. So the next time I came back, I had borrowed this camouflage cloth, and I kind of just used sticks to hold it up. And I sat there with my big lens, excuse me, and I waited for over an hour, because just the disruption of me putting the blind in place, obviously everything's going to leave. But after over an hour, a wood duck peeked out from the reeds and then went back in. A few minutes later, 2 wood ducks did the same thing, went back in. And then they just all started coming out. Excuse me, I need water. They just all started coming out, and then I just started, to finally get to see some of their behaviors and their beauty, and I was hooked at that point. But what I thought was really cool this first time, now these aren't great images, but I just started to see some unique behaviors that you don't think about, which is this mating pair of dragonflies flew overhead, and this wood duck jumped up and grabbed it out of the air and then ate it. So And then a little bit later on, a turtle on a log, a painted turtle, and the wood duck just used it as a stepping stone and walked right over it. So I knew I wanted to, I knew I was kind of on to how I was going to get my images and observe the behaviors. But they were getting ready to fly away for the winter. So over the winter, I invested in my own camouflage cloth, and I poured through all the wood duck documentation that I could find. Either friends had them or I went out and bought them. And I just made a kind of a mental list of all the behaviors that I wanted to photograph, which was pretty much anything that I could possibly witness. But I did want to see them come back in the spring and go through their courtship and their mating and all the behaviors. So in the springtime, as the ice melted on the pond, the wood ducks began to return. And I found this really great spot at the edge of the shore where I could actually use a multiflora rose, which I know invasive, but I'm actually using a multiflora rose limb to hold up the blind here because they're kind of stout and sturdy and and they kind of grip. So this was where I made my home for every chance I could get for a few weeks until the vegetation grew to be too much, and I ended up having to sit in the pond. Behind this log on the front side of this log is actual water. So I'm doing my best to get some visibility. And then that's how I pretty much spent the seasons of 2015. And then a couple of years later, 3 years later, in 2018, we received grant funding from Rockwell Collins, and we actually built a solid fixture at Brick Pond. So this is on the far side of Brick Pond, or the south side of Brick Pond. So I designed it and we built it, and it allows a view of a beaver lodge, a wood duck nesting box that we installed, which unfortunately I put it in a bad spot because you can see that it kind of blocks the lodge a little bit. And then a great log for perching. So I knew that this would be a great area for a lot of activity. And it allows, high ports for viewing or low ports for that intimate shot, which is what I prefer. And so that's how I spent. I mean, I've spent quality time in blinds all throughout the pond and in that wood duck box, and I got to see some really interesting behaviors that I had expected and others that I had not expected to see, or some that I wanted to see but never thought in a million years I would. So we're gonna go through the deep dive on wood ducks, and then we're gonna do just a shallower dive with some of the other species as time permits. So we left off with wood ducks flying south for the winter. During the autumn, they start to pair up. The hen will, and over the winter, the hen will choose an appropriate mate who she thinks will protect her against other males, and have good genes basically to procreate. And once they do find the male, they're territorial and they just back off. This is my log and this is my mate. And then they spend a lot of time together throughout the migration season. And I had to put the words on here because I knew I was going to blank it when I wrote it, but and I apologize if I get the pronunciation wrong, but it's like rete mirabile, which is it's a network of veins and arteries that are close together. And I'm sorry, that it minimizes heat loss for them. So the arteries that transfer the warm blood into the legs are in contact with the veins that return the colder blood to the bird's heart, and the arteries warm the veins. So because the veins also cool the arteries, the bird's feet are closer to the environment, temperature, and don't lose as much heat as otherwise they would. And then by standing on one leg, a bird reduces heat by half the amount lost through the unfeathered limb. So that's why you very often will see a bird standing on one leg, especially on cooler days. And I just thought this was cute, the symmetry of them sleeping. They stayed like this for a while. So after they came back, this is the beginning of spring, they're gonna start to court and mate. And one behavior that I had read about was when the female will pick a mate, but if there's an alternate mate, but there's often a bachelor male, that will kind of wait in the wings and hope that she'll realize that her chosen male isn't gonna meet up to her criteria, and she'll go for the interloper is basically what it's called. So this is the interloper behavior, and I did actually see through the season that he was always kind of there, but she had chosen her mate. Wood ducks are dabbling ducks, and they look for vegetation or nuts at the surface or close, slightly below the surface. Sometimes small invertebrates, like you saw earlier, or fish, small fish. They have been known to dive. Typically, it's just the adult female when she really needs more nutrition, as she's making eggs or feeding her, she's not feeding her young. What am I saying? We'll get there. But here's just a little, I thought this was interesting because and if the video is not coming through, let me know, because I've got a few video clips here. But I like the behavior, the interaction between the two males. And then the second male just decides to take off too afterwards. So the next behavior that I wanted to witness, and this was the big one for me, was the courtship behavior. And it's called allopreening, or mutual grooming, where one bird will groom the skin or feathers of another bird. It's kind of to enhance the pair bond and as a sign of affection. So you'll often see this between both. It's mutual. So, and then of course there's mating, which I only got a glimpse of, and this is pretty far up across the pond, so the video is not great, but you can see how quickly it occurs. There are chats. Is the video not coming through, or is it just?
No, the video is great.
Okay, great. Okay, anyway, so you can see how quick that was. It wasn't a great, you can see the male on the female, but I'm going to show you a mallard so I can show you better the behavior. So the male will grab onto the female's head feathers, and then, it's very quick after he mounts and then gets off. And I don't want to go into a lot of detail, but the male organ is spiral shaped, and the woman's vagina is corkscrew in the reverse. So that kind of gives her a little bit of the upper hand. And if she doesn't want to allow him to enter, or he doesn't want her, because especially with mallards, there's a lot of mob sex, and I haven't seen it with wood ducks yet. I don't think it's as bad for them. It could be, I guess, in a highly populated area. And then I also did witness some blue-winged teal one spring. They don't actually stick around though. This was during migration. Anyway, then the female starts laying eggs, and wood ducks are cavity nesters. So they'll either nest in a tree, or in this case, it's the wood duck box that we installed. So the spring after we installed the wood duck box and the blind, a hen actually did nest in that box, and I did get to witness that. The female starts to spend more time away from the male, and the males start to spend more time together. And I call this boys club. So I got to witness this a couple different springs. And I liked this moment because it shows kind of the territorial nature of wood ducks. Don't get too close to me. And this guy meant business. Either that or they had some sort of rivalry over a female. I don't know. But at this point, then the male is this is the last he's going to have, is just beautiful plumage. You can see all the iridescence. I really liked this one because it showed a lot of more iridescence at the same time. In this one, the way his feathers were kind of strewn about. So the very first thing that they're going to lose then is the flank feathers. And you can see that this one has lost quite a few flank feathers here. And also some tail feathers. So at this point, then the males are going to lose their flight feathers, and they don't want to be sitting out visible, so they completely disappear. I didn't see a single male beyond this point. I really wanted to, but they mean business, so you don't see the males then. For 4 weeks they go through this molt, and then they reemerge in their summer molt, which looks very similar to the female, except the male has the red eye and the orange beak. This might actually be a juvenile, but it's the same as the juveniles, except I don't think that the juvenile has this line here. I think the juvenile does have the line here. So this might actually be a juvenile here, but this is the same molt, basically. And then at this point, the female is only coming out for short breaks during the day because she needs to incubate her eggs. And this goes on for about 4 weeks. She'll come out, she'll eat, preen, and stretch, and then fly back into the box. And I only caught tail feathers of that activity, but I did get to see that 1 year. And this is what I was saying about to the position of the box. We faced it east because that's where they say the direction they're most likely to find the box. But unfortunately, where the blind is, and we really had no choice but where to put the blind, because it was the highest ground and it was a very wet year. So we would like to move the box at some point. We just haven't gotten to it. After 4 weeks, then you're going to start seeing scenes like this. The female's feathers are quite spread out, and that's because she's hiding something underneath. And then they all start to come out because ducklings are very fidgety and they don't sit still. And I have a little clip of some fun activity from that year. So it had been raining that day and the log was a little bit slippery. They kept all falling off. Some wood ducks and most duck species or other waterfowl will ride the tail. Will hitch a ride on the mom's back to kind of save some energy. I don't have a clip here, but if you've ever watched a group of a brood of ducklings following the mom. She's going pretty fast, and they're struggling to keep up. So it's nice to get that little rest. Now, at the same time, I'm mergansers, hooded mergansers are also nesting, and they have the same season. They nest in the same type of box. So they're also cavity nesters. So this is a hooded merganser from an earlier season that is obviously brooding her ducklings as well. And I raise this because very often a hooded merganser will lay her eggs in a hen wood duck's box. And I actually got to see that behavior on my very first year. So it's high noon and the light is horrible, but this group came up on a log, and they were she was raising one hooded merganser as her own. This is technically called interspecific brood parasitism, or interspecies nest parasitism. And it's not documented that a female wood duck would do this with a hooded merganser. I've only heard of it with in this direction. So when I submitted this to Birdwatching Magazine, they actually published this image because it was a behavior you just don't see every day. And the wood duck just raises the merganser as her own. Even though I do want to point out that hooded mergansers are diving ducks, which is a very different behavior, obviously, than dabbling ducks. And I included this image to show you one other behavior that a wood duck or ducks have, which is they can sleep kind of half sleep. So they can shut half of their brain off and keep watch from the other half. They're very low on the food chain. So they always have to keep an eye out for predators, especially with ducklings around. And ducks tend to have large broods. Wood ducks can have broods up to about 12 eggs. And I always say it's the cycle of nature. They're not all going to survive. You know, a lot of them are going to be eaten or killed in some way. And that's kind of the evolutionary response to that, to being low on the food chain, is to create large or produce large broods. And this is just to show that they're precocial in nature. So the minute they jump out of the box and start living on the water, they live on the water for the rest of their lives, except when they're flying, obviously, and they can, you know, they sit on logs. But the ducklings know to feed themselves, and they're attracted to objects in the water or bright colored objects that will capture their attention. And this is a red raspberry slime mold that caught their attention, and you can see that this one actually took a little nibble. They didn't find it appetizing, so they moved on, but I thought that was a cute moment. And here they're fighting over a nut. Early in July, I saw this when I was sitting in my blind. There were so many families that came out. In this image, you can see at least 3, maybe 4. And then there were even older families that had come out. So they're just varying ages. I had no idea that there were that many wood ducks nesting on this pond. Among that group was a hooded merganser. And it sort of stayed kind of near a small family. And I suspected it may be the sibling from the mixed family that I saw. I don't know for sure, but I did see some unique behavior in that one small family, which was they're diving. As I mentioned earlier, wood ducks generally don't dive, and it's documented that it's the adults that do when they do dive. And so I don't know, this entire family was diving and none of the other families were diving. So I don't know if they were influenced by their foster sibling, or if there was just something really good beneath the water that they were all interested in. but I thought that was a really unique behavior to have witnessed. They would dive down and then they would emerge a little further away and it was really, really fun to see. This is about 7 weeks old, and this is about the first time you can start seeing the distinction between the genders. So the males start developing their distinct saddle markings. So you can see 3 males here, and then these are 2 females, and this is the mother over on the right. So one thing that I mentioned earlier, which is you see this line only, I believe that's only seen in the juveniles. So that one earlier that I said was probably a juvenile, and that is why, because you're seeing that line. And they're opportunistic feeders. So this one just reached down, grabbed a frog, flipped it around, and swallowed it whole. This one got a little overzealous, I think, and thought he could go for a turtle. I don't know what this was about. And then and in the previous couple, you could see that they're starting to develop the red eye. The males are starting to develop that red eye and orange beak. So you're starting to see more and more. And then, of course, they start to look a little muddled. And then they develop into the adult plumage. And it's, I think it's like 120 days until they get into their mature adult plumage. They are able to procreate in their first season after they return in the spring. And so that's it for wood ducks. And then there's just some other wild behaviors that I wanted to just touch on as much as possible. And then I have a 5-minute video at the end that tells a really unique story that I witnessed. So the wading birds that spend time at this particular pond or in this area are great blue herons, who would be here all year round. They don't really migrate, except they're moving around to look for open water. Green herons migrate in the autumn, and then they return in the spring. And then great egrets just stop on by and as they're migrating north. So it's interesting, the 3 different wading birds, but their behaviors are so different. And great blue herons are, of course, the largest of the wading birds that spend time here. And they have a wingspan of over 6 feet. And they look almost prehistoric when they're flying. And they have most herons have a very long dagger-like build, and they can spear fish, and they'll flip it in order to swallow it head first. And this one really struggled with this catfish for a really long time, trying to swallow it. And then once it did swallow it, it first swallowed it, I think it got stuck, and then it hacked it back out, and then it tried again. So he was having some real struggles for a long time. And I don't have the full video of that, so this is just what we see. This is struggling here. They like to hunt by themselves. So this one's telling the other one to go away. And this was a fun little thing that you see sometimes is on sunny days, they're spreading their wings up so that they can cool off a little bit and get some sun on those wings. And they're kind of opportunistic feeders as well. If there are young babies in a nest, they won't hesitate to take the babies out of the nest. So the nesting grackles were all over this guy until it left. And this is a juvenile versus an adult, or a juvenile versus an adult. You can see the distinct differences in the plumage. Although this is also a mating adult. And then green herons. Again, adult versus juvenile. The striations are much more pronounced in the juvenile, and that's the biggest difference that you're going to see. And honestly, if you can get close to a green heron in this area, it's likely a juvenile, because they're less wary than the adults. But I thought they have some kind of fun hunting behaviors and hunting stance. So they'll really hold on, and then they can even almost be upside down while they're waiting for prey, and then nab their prey right out of the water. And this one I thought was pretty cool, because it was just preening away, and I didn't think it was hunting at all. And all of a sudden it just reached in and grabbed this large tadpole, carried it across the log, and then worked with it to try to get it back into its mouth, and then swallowed it whole. And then it was still hungry. It spent over an hour and a half fishing, and it still went and got more. And then the great egrets are just, like I said, migrating through. And, you know, it's fun to see them for a while. They're pretty similar, but they seem to take smaller prey. But the behavior is pretty similar. Canada geese nest. You'll see these are the earliest nesters, and they're very gregarious. They spend a lot of time in large groups, and as soon as one takes off, they all take off, and then they come and land again. And here's a behavior that most birds do, which is the wing stretch behavior. It's just a comfort move, or just to maybe stretch out. Canada geese are monogamous, and they mate for life, basically, unless like one mate is lost. And so you can see the female nesting back there. So the adult male is gonna protect the female, and they're very bold about it too. I included this because you could see how cool it was, how chilly it was in the air, because they're so early nesters. But they're very territorial, and you don't want to mess with a goose who's protecting his mate. And I liked this because she looked like she was trying to keep as low as possible so that she wouldn't be seen. But she's sitting on a nest here. Actually, when I first saw her, I thought she was dead. And then I realized that she was blinking. And I included this just to show you the size difference between a Canada goose and a hen wood duck. They're pretty large. The grackles, I like this moment because when the grackles are nesting, both the male and the female spend all day long filling up beaks full of invertebrates, and then they take it back to their nest. The whole day that I was there, and I spent several hours in the blind that day, they kept doing over and over and over again. Snapping turtles, the largest turtles, freshwater turtles, I think in North America. They can get, I think, up to 35 pounds. And you'll normally see this, which is basically just a nose sticking out of the water, and it just looks like a tree, because they wait for their prey to come by, and then they just nab it out of the water. And unfortunately, I don't have that image, but they really blend in. And I don't know if this one was trying to climb up. You can see it right here on the bottom left. He's trying to climb up onto the log, or if he was hoping to grab her. She's got ducklings over on the left here, but she's not having it. And during the warmer summer days, they'll come out and catch some rays, and you can see the ridged tail here. But they often have moss all over them. And here's just this they kept climbing up and then climbing back down into the water. So I don't know for what purpose. They were getting ready to mate, or with laying eggs. It wasn't obvious to me. I included this because you can really see that scaly tail. That's so cool. And they're significantly larger than painted turtles. And I did read that they would eat painted or smaller turtles. So I don't know if this one was getting a little nervous here, but I just thought this was kind of a unique moment. And that brings me to painted turtles. Oh, and we're running low on time, so I just thought this was kind of cool. They'll perch anywhere there's a surface. So I think we're running short, and I have a video that I want to show you guys. Oh, and the coolest thing that I've seen on the pond, of course, is this rare moment with a bobcat. If you spend quality time in an area, you're going to see everything that not everything that it has to offer, but you keep seeing new things, and that was a pretty awesome moment. So I have a story about a hen wood duck was on eggs, and this hooded merganser just kept coming back to that box, and every morning she would swim around the area, and she was always there. And so I just thought this was kind of an interesting story. This is also the only time I've seen the ducklings jump out of the box. So mornings were peaceful as fog formed a shroud around the pond. A hen wood duck was sitting on eggs, on a vigil that fueled my own. After sunrise, she would break to eat, preen, and stretch before resuming her precious burden. A lone hooded merganser appeared each day to surveil the area. She endured dense fog and driving rain. She wasn't always alone. She perched at length on the occupied box, sometimes with a friend or two. One early June morning, the sun rose hot and the fog burned quickly. The hen wood duck stuck her head out of the box. She jumped to the water and began to call. Sensing a threat, she then flew off. After circling the pond, she returned to her brood. Back in the box, she waited for her moment. The hooded merganser appeared on the scene. Tension mounted. And for any time at all. 5 brand new wood ducks began life on the pond. So that kind of concludes the storytelling part of it. There was something I was going to mention about that and I forgot. Oh yeah, so I did at the end of that season, I did retrieve the contents of the nest box. I actually retrieved the box because we were going to move it, and then we ended up never moving it, so it's back where it was. And the only eggs in the box that did not hatch were both wood duck eggs. So I had wondered if possibly there was a hooded merganser egg in the box, and that's why the hooded merganser paid such close attention to this. I don't know what the deal was with her. I've still not figured that out. So, but that's it. So I see that I'm going to stop sharing and look at the chat.
Great, thank you so much. What amazing pictures and video, and great behavior that you captured. I was wondering with the hooded merganser duckling, if it would only dabble, and then how that might affect its survival in the future. But it turns out it seems like they are born kind of knowing what to feed or how to feed, or maybe taught the others. But yeah, I was wondering if it would go the other way, if just dabbling would become a learned behavior and put it at a disadvantage, but it looks like not.
That's a really good point. Now, I had wondered as well, like what was going to happen there. And I really think it did go the other way. I really think that was the family that was diving. It makes perfect sense. And it was the only family that was diving. So one other note, I have a friend out in somewhere on the East Coast who actually witnessed a wood duck raising itself from a very early age. I think it was like a couple weeks old, maybe even less. Its entire family got killed off. And because they're so self-sufficient, they really only need brooding and protection when they're that little. So they can feed themselves and groom themselves. So, oh, thank you. The average wood, that's a really good question. I don't know the answer to how much does the average wood duck weigh? But I can get back to you. I will do the research. Also another good question, what size is the hole in the nesting box? That's very specific for the species. So and I can't remember, but I can look it up. Yes, that's true. Wood ducks will also dump eggs in other wood ducks' nest box. Partly and that'll happen a lot when their nest box are too close together and they can't quite remember which one, or maybe they're just lazy. But oh wow, what an amazing behavior, witnessing a snapping turtle kill a great egret for lunch. That's amazing. Who was that? Did it just take it out of the water?
No, it kept pulling it under the water and trying to drown it.
Oh.
And it took like 30 minutes. It was awful.
Oh yeah, that would be very difficult. I mean, I would want to, the naturalist in me would want to witness it, and the photographer, but I wouldn't want to witness it for obvious reasons. What is the best baffle? I mean, ours is perched on an 8-foot stump on the edge of our pond. As long as it's high enough so that something can't climb onto it, I guess it needs to be separated from the water. So I don't really know the size that they have to be. I mean, I can find out more specs on that. We got ours from Wild Birds Unlimited. Actually, it was a Christmas present for me one year. I asked for wood duck boxes for Christmas, and then I donated a couple to Waterman Center for Brick Pond. You guys are awesome. Thank you. Yes, I would love to photograph hooded mergansers as well. Anything. That's the cool thing about that I discovered when I first started this was every single week something new surprises me. And it's just every time when you're invisible, the ecosystem really comes alive and they're really showing you their true nature, and it's just amazing. Do the geese and ducks get along or compete? I have not seen any competition actually among the geese and the ducks. Except maybe no, I haven't. I think because there's no threat. I actually thought it would be kind of cool to spend a night in the blind at some point, but I'm also too scared to. So somebody asked if I ever go to the blind at night and was there anything to observe? I think sounds for sure. And I in the early, and I usually just go at sunrise to capture the earliest morning behaviors, but things start before at dawn or before dawn. So we cut up a wood duck box, or put up a wood duck box on tidal wetland about 20 feet above the marsh on a high bank. Will it be attractive? So the key to attracting wood ducks to an area, it should have some surface vegetation, obviously a food source, but they're secretive or sensitive, extremely sensitive species. They have large eyes in proportion to their heads, much larger than hooded mergansers, and they need a tree-lined water source. So if you don't have large trees lining at least half of your water, they're probably not going to come. What material do they use for nesting? That's a really good question. And I had a picture. It looked like straw or something like that, but I know, we put the straw in there. That's probably why. we put stuff in there. So I know that they'll put downy feathers around for softness, but they don't actually, I don't think they gather nesting materials. So when we installed the wood duck boxes, we put stuff in them. I could be wrong. And I will have to confirm that unless somebody knows. Raccoon baffle, yeah. Oh, thank you. Wood ducks weigh 1.3 pounds. Oh yeah, the bobcat that was early on too, and I was not prepared for it. I had been shooting landscape, and my photography settings were not for wildlife. But that was the bobcat experience was I was just walking through the brick pond, and a squirrel came through running through on a tree, and then a cat came up right behind it, and it took me for a moment to register that it was a bobcat. And the bobcat looked left, and then it looked forward, and then it noticed me, and then it left. But it was long enough to get a photo. I do print and sell any photography, so if you're interested, please reach out. I have a local photographer that I really like. So, and it's on my website as well, which I'll just type in the box here. So if I missed anything, let me know. Otherwise, does anyone have any additional questions?
Teri, did you answer, is the blind available to the public?
Oh, yes, it is. Yes, it is. I did not see that one. Thank you all.